Hello and welcome back to the Journey Mappers podcast, the official podcast of the OU Pledge, sponsored by the Oakland University Credit Union. My name is Yejie Lee, and I'm a Korean life design coach at the Korean Life Design Center. And today I'm joined by Rebecca Mix, an Oakland University alum who majored in English and has built a career in publishing as a New York Times bestselling author. In this episode, we'll talk about creativity, resilience, and realities of publishing and what it means to pursue a passion that doesn't always feel practical. Rebecca, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
I'm so excited to learn more about you and your journey through this podcast. But first of all, for listeners who are new to you and your books, can you give us a quick intro about yourself and how you would describe your books?
Yeah, I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me. I am Rebecca Mix. I'm the New York Times bestselling author of several fantasy novels. I always say the through line is weird magical books. I've written books like The Ones We Burn, The Moss Heart's Promise duology, and the most recent I Killed the King duology. And yeah, super excited.
Yeah, those are amazing genres that I think young adults are really into right now. And can't wait to hear about the new book that you're releasing soon. Yeah. Well, first of all, I want to kind of go back to maybe the time you were at OU and maybe when you first started thinking about writing as a career. Did you always know that you wanted to be a writer?
Yeah, so I have always loved story. And I think before I knew that author was a job that you could have, like my mom talks about like how I would make my parents sit on the couch and I'd be like, I'm going to perform a show for you. And it'd be like my stuffed animals with like murder plots and betrayals when I was like 4. But pretty early on, like I fell in love with writing when I was in middle school and then realized that authors were people who were alive, not just old dead people. Mm-hmm. So I always wanted to write books. I had no idea how I was going to do that or like how publishing worked. But it was pretty like locked on that for most of my life.
Yeah, that's really cool. And when you got to OU, did you have trouble like deciding on a major? Or was it always like something related to writing and English?
I don't think I had trouble. I so wanted to be an author that I truly had the mindset of like, I'm going to get a degree and go get a job to like pay my bills until I can be an author or like get a job so that I can write on the side if I don't get to become an author. And English was the thing that I was always best at. So I got an English degree with a minor in communication. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't like, this is like probably not like the best advice, but it's not like I had a long thought out career strategy. I just was like, well, if I have a degree, I know I'm smart, I can get some job doing something. And that was my half-baked plan when I was 18.
So you always had a sort of a realistic plan for being a writer and always maybe had a backup plan of what you might have to do to wait until you can be a full-time writer.
Yeah, I feel like especially now, I don't know if you were like in any of the book spaces online, but there's this attitude that like, and I hear this from young readers all the time, where if they're not an author, by the time they're 20, they're a failure, which is just ridiculous because there are some like huge authors like Karen McCannis who didn't publish their first book until in their 50s. Or I know the author of Lessons in Chemistry. She wrote that book after she retired. So I didn't come from money. I didn't have like rich parents. I knew I was going to need to. I remember telling my dad I wanted to be an author and he goes, "That's great. I'm not paying your rent." And I was like, okay. So I always had jobs and I was always working and I just knew that I would be doing that and writing on the side. And when I meet other people that want to write and I see the panic in their eyes, especially when they're like 18, I'm like, you have so much time. And it's actually a blessing if your early stuff doesn't get published. Like, just go get a job and keep making stuff.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit more about why you think that's a blessing. I'm curious.
I think that you spend a lot of your early time teaching yourself how to write. And there are things, even in my debut, because I started writing it when I was like 23, that I wouldn't do now. And I don't like dislike it. It's a reflection of who I was at the time. But your first book being published is a big burden because it's really hard to write another one. And I think there's a huge blessing in like writing multiple books and then going nowhere. Because it's not nowhere. It's not wasted work. You're teaching yourself how to write. And teaching yourself that you can continue to do that and like make a better piece of art. And no new writer wants to hear that. Like no new writer wants to hear like, yeah, it's actually great. Like write your first book and start the next one because they're like, this is my precious baby angel genius. And we all feel that way and it's usually not.
Yeah. And how many books did you write until maybe your first debut?
So my debut, The Ones We Burn, was my fourth,
Okay.
which like in the grand scheme of publishing is not that many. Like that's considered fast. It didn't feel fast at the time because I was getting hundreds of rejections and I was like, someone please. But I have friends, it was like their 10th or their 15th. So it just is, I don't know, part of the game.
What made you persevere even with those rejections?
I think part of it was stubbornness. I'm very much someone that like, if you tell me that I can't do something, I'll be like, watch me. But also I just love to write. So like I would write even if I wasn't an author, which I think is probably why I am an author. And every time I got a rejection, when I actually was at OU, I took a creative writing class with, I think his name was Jeff Chapman. I might be wrong on the first name, but I know it was Professor Chapman. And he had us write short fiction and submit it to short fiction magazines. And it was invaluable for me because I got so many rejections and some of them were so mean, like so much meaner than I've ever gotten from traditional publishing. I will never forget one like small magazine wrote back and said, "Egads, is this a joke?" And I was like 20 and so proud of that story, but it hurt my feelings for 30 seconds. And I think it was a useful lesson of like, oh, these rejections mean nothing. I can just keep going. And you start to like just rack them up. And I tell people all the time, like it's the whole job. Like I still get rejected now, like all the time. So it was really nice that someone forced me to get used to it early. So by the time I was sending out my book for like traditional publishing, when I was getting the no's and stuff, I was like, it's not as mean as that one. I've been here before.
So you've learned to become comfortable with criticism and feedback.
Yeah.
No, I think that's important in any type of job setting, really.
For sure. Yeah. I think it's helpful to learn that it usually has it has nothing to do with you, even if it's your work. And it's essential whether you are an artist or just someone in a job. Like my sister is a nurse. They get like reviews from patients and stuff, right? Because they send in feedback to figure out like, is this actually relevant to my work or is this person just having a bad day or did they not understand? And like learning to parse through that is quite helpful.
No, 100%. Yeah, I agree. Well, awesome. Well, I kind of want to talk a little bit more about your creative process and how you go about writing. So here's a question. When a new story begins for you, what usually comes first? The spark of an idea, the characters, or the world? And where does that initial inspiration tend to come from?
Yeah, so this is such a hard and funny question, in part because I feel like I spend a lot of time talking about writing, trying to take the mysticism out of it, because a lot of people, I think, use that as an excuse where they're like, I'm not inspired, I can't write. But like, ideas are one of those weird things where like, I don't know if it's like, you know, the universe or demons or whatever. Like I don't know what it is, but there was like an old belief in British literature that like ideas were like literal like demons floating around in like the space or whatever. But like they just show up. So I usually get like a really strong image. So my middle grade duology, The Moss Heart's Promise, is about a young fairy trapped in a rotting terrarium. And she finds out that like her world is dying. She has to escape. I was laying in bed one day looking at a multi-terrarium on my desk. And I was like, man, it would suck to be stuck in one of those. And it was like a lightning strike. And it's this like snowball down a hill that like builds shape and picks up speed. I killed the king. I went to a book club for a terrible book that I'll never reveal the title because that wouldn't be nice, but it was real bad. And like listening to everyone in the book club talk about why they didn't like it and what they liked about murder mystery, like what they like about murder mysteries. I went home that night and then woke up at 6 a.m. and was like, why fantasy locked room? And like they just show up. And it seems now the further I get in my career, once a book is off my plate, like I usually get an idea for the next one
Wow.
when it's moving on to the point where like I have 2 different books moving towards copy edits right now, which is like the very end of the process. And I'm like, I feel like paranoid. I'm like, okay, what's coming? Like, we'll see.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, so sometimes it can come from just like looking at an object, or it could come from this experience that you have with talking to people.
For sure. Yeah. And from everywhere, whether it's like talking to people or reading or playing video games. I tell writers all the time that like your job is to feed your curiosity in any way you can. So go get hobbies, read, consume art, go out in the world, because you literally never know like where it's going to come from.
Yeah. But I feel like it's one thing to think of an idea, but it's a total different story to really dig in deep and write like hundreds of pages about that idea. What does your writing process look like?
So it has changed over the years. When I was a new writer, a lot of people, when they're getting into writing, they do something called pantsing, which is you're flying by the seat of your pants. You're making it up as you go. And I'll never forget when I met my friend Amy Carter, who's another Michigan author. She's like so talented. Her books are great. And she doesn't mind when I tell this story. She thinks it's funny. I met her when I was early in publishing, and she said, do you revise? Like, do you plan out the stories in advance? And I said, no. And she goes, yeah, it's a skill. You'll learn eventually. And I was like, excuse me? She was right. So now that I've been publishing, like you just learn that you either work out the kinks in the draft or in the revision outline. And that's not to say that drafting goes perfectly. But now when I have a new idea, I do a lot of prep work and research, and I outline the entire book. So I'm writing like chapter summaries and figuring out the problems and trying to not write myself into a hole so that I'm not throwing out entire drafts. It's much easier to fix a page than it is 400 pages.
Right. Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. And is that something that you've learned when you were at OU in your English program?
I don't think so. I think that just comes from practice. But being in my English program did teach me how to research and how to like hunt for stuff in text, and also how to pull something out of something I didn't necessarily want to read. So I think the English program was valuable in the sense that like I'm a genre writer, right? Like I write fantasy, and even in creative writing classes, when I was at OU, they had a little bit more of a literary tilt that tends to be common in like university spaces. And then I have an English literature degree. So like I'm not reading, Project Hail Mary or like contemporary stuff. But I'll never forget, I read Robinson Crusoe for one of my classes and I loved it and like got ideas for a book from it. So I think there is also like being in my English program taught me the value in being fed things and reading things you wouldn't seek out on your own. And now I feel like I'm always on a quest to find things I wouldn't normally pick up, because I'm like, how do I find it? Like, I know it'll make me a better writer. Where is it?
Yeah. And I can see how maybe doing some research and doing some more prep work could help out with like people who might be having writer's block too.
For sure. Yeah, there's a wonderful quote from John Green where he talks about how he was complaining to his dad about having writer's block. And his dad said, what do you mean you have writer's block? Plumbers don't get plumber's block. And I like would get yelled at on the internet, but I think writer's block tends to be a system of alarms going off telling you something isn't working or you're burnt out. So it's usually one of the two. Something is wrong in the book, or you need to go take a break and like stare at birds and go for a walk. But I think writer's block, in the sense we think of it, where you're like, the muse just isn't speaking to me. I think that's kind of a cop-out. And usually it's either like you, like mental health or burnout or whatever, or it's something in your brain saying you've gone down the wrong path, you need to fix it. And just, laying around your house going, I don't know, I'm not inspired, won't get you there.
Yeah. No, I love that. I love that explanation and analogy.
Hey, Golden Grizzlies. Ready to turn everyday spending into smart savings? Cashback Plus, powered by OU Credit Union, lets you score unlimited cash back without a credit card. Grab your morning coffee, DoorDash your favorite meal, or shop online to make the most out of every purchase. Cashback Plus, your money, your perks, your way. Join OU Credit Union today and start earning more.
So you're a New York Times bestselling author. How did it feel when you found out?
Confusing. I didn't expect it. And I remember when my agent called me, I saw his name on the phone, and then I almost didn't pick up because I was about to go into a work meeting. And I was like, why is he calling me? It's 5 o'clock. So the New York Times list comes out at 5 o'clock on the Wednesday after your book comes out, a week later. So if it comes out on a Tuesday, it's the next week and that Wednesday.
Okay.
8 days later. That was a bad way to explain that.
So you knew when it would be released if it were to be released?
Yeah.
Okay.
The list comes out at 5 usually. And he was calling me at 5:15. And I was like, oh God, is he calling me to tell me we didn't make it? That would be mean. So I was just confused and thrilled.
That's awesome. And did becoming a New York Times bestselling author change the way you see your work or how you do your work?
I don't think so. The New York Times thing is funny because it matters a lot to publishers, and it's a marketing term, and I get to use it forever. But I've had books that I think are objectively better or that I love more that haven't done as well. So it's just, I don't know, one of those things where it's a blessing. I get to call myself the New York Times bestselling author and then just hope that I get to hit the list again with the next thing.
Yeah. Well, I know you've been on that list for a while, but congratulations, and we're so proud of you. And
thank you.
Yeah, I hope your other works and books that are to be released will remain on that list as well. And
me too.
Yeah.
We'll see. You never know. It's random, so I'm always like, okay, cool. As long as I get to write more books, I'm thrilled. All the other stuff is a bonus.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So another question is, was there a moment, either before or after success, when continuing felt hard and helped you move through it?
Yeah. I don't know. There's two pockets, right? So there's the actual work can be difficult because it is a creative job, even when I try to take all of the magic and inspiration and mysticism that can keep you stuck and be like, nope, you can outline, you can do this. There just is a point with every single book where I'm lying on the floor and I'm like, I'm going to have to give the money back. I don't know what to do. I give up. And now that I'm 8 books in, my whole family doesn't buy it anymore. And they'll be like, you say that every time. And I'm like, shut up. It's different this time. It never is. But also it's a hard industry. It's really hard to stay published. I don't remember what it is, but there's an insane stat of how few people that sell one book will have a third contract because so many people leave the industry because it's not for them or they can't sell another book. And the hard industry part, I just have to remind myself that all I can control is the writing and have a good team behind me. The despair over the book just gets fixed from usually me having a deadline and being like, okay, you've been here before. You've fixed it before. I'm actually having that with one of my books right now. So we'll see if it's the first one I don't get through. I hope not.
Yeah. And what is sort of your coping mechanism when you're having those moments of doubts and anxiety?
I think it usually, when it's the actual book, it's that alarm system I talked about. So it's usually because something isn't right and I don't know how to fix it. And that's the worst feeling in the world. So that usually just means I need to sometimes buckle down and work. Sometimes I need to take a beat and go binge read 3 books and remember what a real book looks like and why I like to read and go for walks and stare at birds. The existential dread over the state of the publishing industry, I don't have an answer to that. I just try not to think about it because I can't fix it. And so I'm like, okay, I'm over here writing my little books. Hope you guys figure all of this out eventually.
Yeah, I love the way that you're, I guess, taking yourself outside of that moment and then just really refreshing and keeping yourself reminded of why you're doing this and what's important to you. And I think that's what makes you a great writer. And I love the perseverance and just the bravery of just staying resilient in this industry that can feel a little bit more cutthroat.
I think it's helpful to have perspective too of I love my job. It's my dream job. I wanted to do it my whole life. I write books for a living. I just make up little stories. And I'm really lucky that I get to do that. So like that doesn't negate the hard work and the perseverance, but like my sister is a nurse that works nights, and I will wake up and she'll be like, got kicked in the head by a patient tonight. Someone tried to tackle me. And like sometimes when I'm having the pity party, I also have to remember that and be like, you could be a nurse getting kicked in the head. Like, you're fine. And I think like sometimes in life you need a little bit of that too, to be like, is this actually a crisis? Sometimes it is. But then sometimes I need to be like, you're fine. You just need to take a shower. Like, go clean your house.
Do you ever find yourself kind of confused between the fantasy world that you're writing about and the reality?
Like my reality?
Yeah.
I think not necessarily confused, but my books tend to mirror my life in really weird ways sometimes. So the biggest example is that my debut is about a pandemic that pops up out of nowhere, and it follows the development of a vaccine, and nobody believes that the pandemic is real. And I sold that book in April of 2020. So when COVID happened, I was like, and I thought I had like a cool original plague idea.
Yeah.
And then when the book came out, everyone was like, she was inspired by COVID. And I was like, no, I wasn't. It was weird. And then Moss Heart, which is about a world rotting with mold, the week that I sold that book, we found out that my apartment was full of black mold and we had to leave. So like that stuff happens more than I would like it to the point where I'm like, hey, I'm going to start writing about brunettes that like have a bunch of money and no problems if this doesn't start or if this doesn't stop. Yeah. But no, I think that a lot of my work is, instead of being confused, I think that so much of being a creative, or not even a creative person, I think like being a grateful person is finding magic in everyday things. So I think it's the opposite of like finding wonder and awe in like the world outside of us and life, and then feeding that into the fantasy stuff.
Oh, which that's beautiful.
A very twee answer that is like touchy-feely, but I don't know.
I love that. Yeah. So for the students who are listening, for whomever is listening to this podcast, what advice would you give them about writing, but don't see it as a practical career?
I would say on the author piece that like every author that I know, like publishing is one of the maybe like only industries where nepotism doesn't exist as much as some readers would like for that to be the case, because they'll be like, this book is terrible. She's an industry plant. That's not real. So every author I know has been where you are, where they're like, I love this. I don't know how to make it happen. I don't know that anyone will ever listen. And like I said earlier, I think that is actually a blessing, because you have to learn how to make in those circumstances, because the fear and the negative feedback and sometimes lack of validation actually only gets worse once there are sales numbers attached and negative reviews. And if you want to be a writer, you have to read. So in the same way that if you wanted to be a painter, you wouldn't go your whole life not looking at other art. I sometimes meet writers that are like, this is apparently a controversial take on the internet, but I just think it's arrogant to think that you shouldn't study your craft. And writing is one of the only jobs where you get to apprentice with any of the masters at any time. Like, you can go read Toni Morrison or Shakespeare, or I think Martha Wells is like a genius, like creating right now. Like, you can go apprentice with them right now by reading their work and study with the masters. You don't get to do that for most other jobs. Like, that's really lucky. So if you want to write, you have to read voraciously and feed your curiosity and read different stuff. So I'm a fantasy author. Half of what I read is nonfiction. And I think I can see the difference in my work when I started doing that, and I started reading outside of fantasy. And then I think if you are young and you want to write, and, you know, let's say you are where I was when I was graduating, and I was like in a state of panic because I was like, I want to write books. I'm not an author. I can't pay my bills with this. What do I do? There are so many employers that need people that can think and that can communicate, and the ability to write can translate to so many jobs. So I used to work in affordable housing. I worked in PR. Those writing skills made me a great catch in those jobs. And there is no shame in going to get a day job that allows you to make your art. I think we have this idea that like you have to be a full-time artist or you're a failure.
Mm-hmm.
That's not how it works.
Right.
And some of the best advice I ever got was my first boss out of college told me to think of my job as the patron, which like scared me because she was like, you're not going to work here forever. And I was like, am I allowed to say that? But you can use those writing skills to go find a job that you can live with so that you can make stuff, or just go use them to find a job you like. Like maybe you don't want to be an author.
Right.
Maybe you just want to write
anything.
Like I worked on really cool disease campaigns when I was in PR, like writing and storytelling and translating medical documents so that people could understand what it meant. There's so many things you can do with that skill. And I think as AI becomes more pervasive and the AI slop continues to pollute everything, I'm already seeing it because I'm 30, so I have friends that are in hiring roles. Like the ability to think and articulate and understand what you're reading, I think is going to become even more valuable, unfortunately. But fortunately for you, if you have a brain.
Right. Yeah. No. So when you were going into jobs that were maybe like less writing oriented or it wasn't a writer job, what was the mindset behind that? Was it like, I need a job, so I'm going to go get whatever I can find?
Mm-hmm.
Or is it that like you saw the writing, I guess, elements in that job that you told yourself, this is something that will be helpful for me in the future?
I think it was definitely the first one, and then it became the second one on accident. So like I truly just wanted a job that wouldn't ruin my life. Like even at, 22, I had no interest in working 60 hours a week, which isn't necessarily like the best. Like I'm not telling other young people like, go only get an easy job. But I just wanted to find something that felt like a meaningful enough use of my time without killing me so I could go home and write my books. And then I was pleasantly surprised as I grew in those roles how much it inspired my work to be learning about like issues of inequity in housing and these like structural governmental issues or issues of disease and how disease spread and how we talk about it and how we think about it. I don't think it's an accident that I wrote a pandemic plague book while working in pharmaceuticals on disease campaigns. It wasn't a total one-for-one, but yeah. I'm sorry. I don't know if that's a good answer.
Yeah, but I mean, it allowed you to learn in an industry and knowledge that you may not have ever learned.
Yeah.
Right? And that probably will, if it has not already, will feed into your writing one day.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think if you are any person, but especially someone who wants to make things and those come out of you, then you have to refill the well, right? You have to feed the creative beast. And you do that by being out in the world or having a daytime career where you stumble into things that you would never learn otherwise, but it can feed that curiosity. And
So looking ahead, what are you most excited about?
So this is the first year since I have been published that I don't have a book out, and I'm going to spend most of 2026 just doing work and setting up the next few years. But next year, I have the sequel to I Killed the King coming out in March. I have my next middle grade, Milo and the Monstrous Betwixt, which I'm so excited about because speaking of failure, I wrote it in 2018 and couldn't figure out how to make it work and then went back and rehabbed it in 2024 and sold it. And that's about a little boy with a concussion who falls under Michigan into like a portal world where kids trade memories for magic and they turn into monsters and he has to go save his sister. So I've got 2 out next year that I'm excited about, and then I will spend much of this year writing. I'm trying to think of how vague I can be. Writing my first adult romantic book, like romantic fantasy, which is a totally new world for me because this will be my 10th book, and all of the other ones have been kidlit, and I finally get to write for adults. I love kidlit, but it's like a totally different world, and I'm very excited about that.
Yeah, I'm excited too, and I can't wait to see how it turns out. Yeah,
me too. Hopefully good. It's not done yet.
So some lightning round questions to wrap up our conversation here. Okay. So are you a coffee drinker or a tea drinker when writing?
Ooh, both.
Both.
So coffee in the morning, and then I switch to tea.
And you love jasmine tea, if I remember correctly.
I love jasmine tea, which is funny because I grew up watching Avatar: The Last Airbender. I don't know if you've, but like Uncle Iroh loves jasmine tea. And then when I was like 10, I remember like asking my mom for jasmine tea and I drank it. I was like, this is gross. And then now as an adult, I like it. I'm like, I've matured, Uncle Iroh.
Yeah, I love that too.
I love green tea. So good.
Favorite fantasy world that's not your own?
Oh, man. Okay, off the top of my head, I don't know if it's like it can be my favorite. So Suzanne Collins, who wrote The Hunger Games, has a series that she wrote before called Gregor the Overlander. And they were some of my favorite books of all time. It's so like creepy and good. And if you have a kid in your life that is like kind of a reluctant reader, give them those books because they're awesome. I love that world. I think it's such clever world building. Also, all of the Redwall books by Brian Jakes, but also most fantasy worlds. That's a hard question.
I know. Whenever I'm asked to name something favorite, I'm like,
yes.
I don't.
I know. I'm going to start making you. I'll be like, what's your favorite fantasy world?
Next time. Yeah. I'll have to prepare.
Yeah.
One word that describes your current work in progress.
Current? Concussions.
Okay.
Middle grade.
So interesting and intriguing.
Monstrous.
If your books were adapted, would you want a movie or a TV series?
Ooh. So I don't know because it's so dependent on how I would say whoever would do the best job. I could see them working as either, and it depends on the book. But if anyone wants to buy my books for film, you're welcome to.
Yeah. I'd love to see your books coming up on like Netflix or something,
too.
right?
It'd be nice.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Rebecca. Like, this has been such a meaningful and fun conversation, learning more about the career in publishing and writing, learning about your process and how your mind works. It's beautiful and amazing. And I think everybody who's listening to this podcast is going to leave inspired and leaving with some hope, too, that, you can be writing maybe right now or maybe in your 50s. And who knows, maybe I'll be writing, too.
Yeah.
But thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you, listeners, for joining us for another episode of Journey Mappers podcast. We'll see you next time.